There's a lot of controversy about the movie Selma being snubbed at the Academy Awards and not getting any acting nominations and just a Best Picture nomination. Now, everyone is talking about how there's all this racism in Hollywood, and this is true. Was clearly evidenced by the behavior of Tina Fey and Amy Poehler at the Golden Globes when they made fun of Bill Cosby in a joke that was just a racist rant that was really disguised as a joke. And it clearly showed the liberal at his true colors. This white liberal showed his true colors at the Golden Globes, and I would say even at the Academy Awards. Um, Here we have on Martin Luther King's birthday the black president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences announcing all of these nominations. Not a single black actor or actress was nominated in any categories. This is the first time we haven't had any nominations for any person of color since 1998. Now, you have guys like Al Sharpton coming out and saying that they want to protest and talk about racism, but this is disingenuous because, it clearly shows an example of what many would call selective outrage, like Tariq Nasheed and David Carroll have both called this selective outrage. Because if we look at, Al Sharpton and his actions, where was Mr. Sharpton when the movie No Good Deed was released in October and featured a black brute? I mean, here is a movie which clearly features a racist stereotype of the very same black men he's been protesting, like deaths of, like Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Trayvon Martin. Yet he does not protest this movie. Again, this clearly shows his selective outrage. And then we have the black filmmaking community and their hypocrisy. Um, Here we have Oprah Winfrey, Lee Daniels, and they're here. These are two of the people who have destroyed the craft of black filmmaking, and they're talking about, racism when for the last 15 years, I mean, in Oprah's case, I go back and say 30 years, they have taken the image of African Americans in film and degraded them and presented this negative image of black performers. I mean, of the image of black people, and then they want to and then won Oscars and awards for these types of films, and got nominated for these types of films. But then they want to be praised for a positive film. Again, this clearly shows the selective outrage and the hypocrisy of black Hollywood right here. You produce degrading images like your Monstrous Balls, your Preciouses, The Help, The Butler, Training Day. All these films featured numerous racist stereotypes. And black actors, black producers, black directors, they all use these films to fast track themselves an Oscar or an Oscar nomination. Oh, I forgot to mention 12 Years a Slave. Also, this is the gimmick that many African American filmmakers used to get themselves a fast tracked Oscar, a fast tracked Oscar nomination, and to jumpstart their stalled careers. But these same people are now going to get upset and cry racism about Selma not getting any acting nominations. Can anyone see the hypocrisy here? I see it clearly as a guy who has studied the entertainment industry since I was 7 years old. These people want these black people in Hollywood and these civil rights hustlers are running a game on people, and they're talking about diversity, but the type of what they really want to do is hustle you. They really don't want diversity. They really don't want change. These people have been milking the system for the last, I mean, in the case of Lee Daniels, and it's been 15 years, but in Oprah Winfrey's case, it's been more than 20, 25 years. They've been running a game, and then we have Al Sharpton, another guy, running a game. And the Negro masses are just sitting there thinking that, you know, these guys are really calling out racism. They're not calling out racism. What they're doing is playing a dog and pony game or horse or some type of game to make themselves look like victims. When in actuality, yes, there is a racist part of this, but nobody's a victim here. I mean, I, as a guy who has studied African American film for the last 20 years, have seen how black film has truly declined. And over the last 15, 20 years, the quality of black films has not been that good. Now, for all the critical acclaim that Selma has received, it was, as I saw it, it was nothing special because we've had these biopics for the last 15 years. I mean, this is how a lot of African American actors fast track themselves to an Oscar nomination or an Academy Award. I mean, let's look at it. Jamie Foxx in Ray, that was in the fast tracked Oscar. Um, was it Lupita Nyong'o? That was a fast tracked Oscar. Um, you know, I might even go as far as say, even with these minstrel roles, Monique and Precious, all of it. What's her name? Um, she was in The Help. Octavia Spencer, Viola Davis. I mean, all of these people have fast tracked themselves to Oscar nominations or Oscars by playing stereotypical roles in films. I mean, this is the formula that many blacks in Hollywood have utilized to gain themselves critical acclaim from Academy Award and a fast track to an Academy Award. This is the trick that they have used. And, it's really disingenuous for many of these people in black people in Hollywood to say that there is racism when they've been participating in minstrel shows that perpetuate racism for the last 15 years. I mean, again, I will go into it again, talking about, your training days with the Black Brute, Monsters Ball, which featured the Black Jezebel, Precious, which featured the Black Mammy, The Help, which featured a Black Mammy, 12 Years a Slave, which featured slaves. And every one of these films, with the exception of maybe Ray, but Ray featured also, another stereotype character, all featured a minstrel or a minstrel type role or a stereotype role in which a black actor played a victim. This is all we have seen for the last 15 years. We have not really seen much innovation. And it's hard to, and the thing is that, as I've seen it, black film has truly gotten lazy. I mean, black filmmakers have really gotten lazy. And there's very little creativity because, many of these filmmakers are focusing more on box office over imagination and creativity. I remember in the 1990s, you had guys like the Hudlin brothers who made House Party. Spike Lee was doing all sorts of great things. His cinematography was beautiful because he had Ernest Dickerson working with him. The scripts were very original. They were very fresh. They were from different perspectives. They told all sorts of different stories and, about black life and the black experience. But when we get to the 2000s and after the Academy Award win of Denzel Washington for Training Day and Halle Berry for Monsters Ball, all of a sudden everything starts falling into a tunnel. And black cinema, instead of giving us all of these different stories about the black experience, starts giving us, the old stereotypes. They all start coming back. All of these old stereotypes start getting repackaged in brand new boxes. And this is what we get. And Tyler Perry he really brought down the quality of film. Him and Lee Daniels together brought down the quality of black cinema and black filmmaking because, Tyler Perry was making hundreds of millions of dollars by producing poor quality films with incredibly terrible scripts, while Lee Daniels was producing films which featured the worst black stereotypes about black people. And right now he continues to produce TV shows like Empire, which continue to feature the worst stereotypes about black people. Um, and these guys have fast tracked, and the whole thing is that they saw that they were fast tracking themselves to Oscars. They were fast tracking themselves to, jump starting their careers and taking themselves to the next level by putting on these stereotype roles. And now, even in the face of all of this, they get upset now because the first film they produce, which supposedly features positive images and is directed by a great woman, Ava DuVernay, Selma, gets snubbed at the Oscars. Well, again, what did you expect when you have presented stereotypes to people for the last 15 years? And this is a big problem that black people have, and you cannot get outraged about the Oscars. I mean, people like Al Sharpton and people in the black community getting outraged over the Oscars nominations, but they didn't get outraged over no good deed. Again, as David Carroll and Tariq Nasheed have both pointed out, this is an example of selective outrage from black people. How can you say that you're outraged about this point, but you weren't outraged by the stereotype black brute that most black people spent $25.4 million in the first week at the box office to go see? This is a clear statement of the hypocrisy of black people regarding the issue of race and diversity in film and how they really view themselves and in these issues. I mean, I look at this whole Selma Snub as another example of black people and their hypocrisy in the statement Black Lives Matter. If black lives really mattered and black people really mattered to themselves, they wouldn't be getting upset over a non-black person's award nomination. That would not be the standard for black people. If you have a sense of self-worth and a sense of value as yourself as a black person, you would look at the Selma Snub and just go, big deal. I judge, because as a film critic myself and the guy who enjoys black films, I judge films by my own standard. I don't go by the Academy standard. I'm going to let you guys know a little fact. After reading Sid Field's screenplay, I learned that the Academy Awards are just a popularity contest. These awards have no value, they have no merit, and they're not a barometer of quality when it comes to film. And most Hollywood insiders know this. They just know that the Academy Award is just something that they give out to say what is the most popular film. It does not mean it was the best picture. I'll give you some examples. Like 1968's The Swimmer, which starred Burt Lancaster. This movie was critically panned when it first came out. And a couple of years later, people started seeing the artistry and the visuals and the storyline, and a lot of people started saying this was a great film. Another film that they critically panned and said was terrible was 1982's The Last American Virgin. This was another film that people said was one of the worst films ever made when it first came out. 25 to 30 years later, this film is now considered a classic story above Nice Guys finishing last. So the Academy is not a barometer of quality when it comes to film. This is why you can't go by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. They are not a gold standard of any kind. What they are is a popularity contest that's controlled by, Hollywood insiders and movie studios to sell art house films that really wouldn't have done well at the box office on their own. So you really can't go by it. And a lot of the things that black people just don't understand is that you can't measure yourself by a white standard or anybody else's standard. You have to look at, other countries. I mean, in Japan, they have a big film industry. In China, they have a big film industry. They judge their films by their own standard. In India, they have Bollywood. They judge themselves by their own standard. I remember a couple of years ago, they had the movie Slumdog Millionaire that won Best Picture. Now, the Indians didn't judge it by the Academy standard. They judged it by their own standard. Also, there are also other in Latin America. They have their own film standard. The black people have to do is start valuing their own work and their own projects, and acclaim their own work and their own projects, and acclaim it to their own standard. This is a big problem we've always had. The Negro, as I see it, always keeps seeing himself through the eyes of the white liberal. And this is what he does, and he doesn't understand that when you start seeing yourself through the eyes of white people, you're giving white people power over you. And when you give people power over you, you're living life on their terms. This is not how God intended for you to live life. He intended for you to live life on His terms and to have the best life possible. This is why He gave you free will. And when you give in to standards like that of the white liberal, you are saying that he is a god over you and he has power over you. I look at the Selma Snub as big deal. You know, so they didn't nominate you for any of their awards. It does not mean anything. What it means really is it's a wake-up call. I've said that black people, I said this years ago in my blog. I've said that, there's a wake-up call. And I've also said in posts on IMDb that this is a wake-up call for black people. Way back, I remember in 2010, they said that there were no black movies nominated at the 2010 Oscars, I think. And the thing is that, again, black people have gotten lazy when it comes to films. We make the same stories over and over again. I mean, all of these biopics, I look at it. I mean, we had Get On Up in the same year as Selma with Chadwick Boseman. That movie was completely forgotten. Again, another example of selective outrage. Because you want to march and protest. Al Sharpton wants to march and protest over Selma not getting any nominations, but then Chadwick Boseman was considered, that was one of his breakthrough performances in Get On Up, a movie which most black people didn't want to go see because, again, it featured a positive image of a black man, and, again, there was no racism in the movie for them to, come at. Because, again, I'll go back to an old David Carroll argument that, black people don't really care about anything unless it involves a white person. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said usually nobody cares if somebody, unless something bad, I'm going to paraphrase. Give me a second. I'm just going to paraphrase what he said. Nobody really cares about anything black unless unless it's about a white person or a non-black person saying something about a black person. Then black people care, because I look at what the box office for Get On Up, and I look at black people's indifferent and apathetic response to Get On Up, a great film, by the way, and it clearly shows me the clear selective outrage black people have. And I also look at the selective outrage black people had over No Good Deed, which featured a stereotypical black brute and featured him, terrorizing a black woman for 90 minutes after he kills a white woman. And again, no outrage from black people. They spent $25.4 million and made this movie #1 at the box office 2 weeks straight. But here, when it comes to Selma and the Oscars, all of a sudden we hear about racism, diversity in Hollywood. We have Al Sharpton talking about how he wants to go out and march and protest. And it clearly shows the selective outrage of black people. I look at it and I say, they need to stop with this hypocrisy. I mean, where were all these people when Ava DuVernay was making I Will Follow a couple of years ago? Great movie featuring Sally Richardson Whitfield in a very incredible humanized performance. Where were they? I mean, I have that movie on DVD. I wrote a great review for it. Even the filmmakers themselves started following me on Twitter and they praised that review. I really care about black film, and I go out of my way to support, good quality black films. But we don't see any Al Sharptons, we don't see any NAACPs, we don't see any of these people unless they can put a racial angle to it. I'm here with these films when they talk about black on black and black on black issues, but you don't see any Al Sharpton unless, the white Academy snubs. Now, yeah, there was racism, and there is racism in Hollywood. I will not deny the racism in Hollywood, but I am also looking at it from an objective perspective, and the way I see, black Hollywood, they really have to start getting their stuff together. This is as I see it, another wake up call to them to really start getting creative because, you know, we've had 15 years of just garbage on film with these Tyler Perry movies, which were just sloppy. I mean, yeah, black actors were getting work, but they weren't getting experience. They weren't honing their skills. They weren't honing their craft. We had these Lee Daniels movies where people weren't honing their skills or honing their craft. They were just, and we had people playing victims again to fast track themselves to Oscars. We've had black people degrading the image of black people in an effort to, make themselves elevate themselves at the expense of the black community for the last 15 years. But yet these same black people like Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, Lee Daniels, no, they now want to say that there's racism when they were the ones promoting the most racist stereotypes in film for 15 years. How can you be a victim of something when you perpetrated it? This is backwards thinking, and the way I look at it is, you can't expect the Academy, and then again, and on top of it, you have the Academy, which is run by which is president is a black woman, and they're now all talking about diversity and all of this foolishness. And what we're going to get is another Al Sharpton hustle, because Al Sharpton, what he's going to do is the same thing he did at Sony Pictures when they got caught up. He's going to take some bribe money, and we're not going to get any real progress. I look at black again. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's just that bad habit I have because I'm getting used to the camera. I'm getting used to talking on camera. But we're not really seeing any diversity in film. I mean, and then we're in the middle of the biggest fantasy explosion, but we have yet to see an African American fantasy movie. We are in the middle of a big superhero craze, and yeah, Marvel Comics is making Black Panther, but we're not seeing any other characters, by independent publishers like myself coming out or being supported by, black people. We're in the middle of this big thing, and yet there's no push by black filmmakers to make any of these materials or any of these properties into films and capitalize on that larger market. We're not seeing that. I mean, these films like The Avengers are making $1 billion. These films like Captain America: The Winter Soldier are making $500-600 million. Dark Knight made over $1 billion. But black filmmakers are still making romantic comedies, Tyler Perry Christian movies. What is it? The other one. These biopics about about former dead celebrities or civil rights activists, or we're making adaptations of, black literary classics no one has read because black people do not read. And these adaptations are horribly misinterpreted, like Oprah Winfrey's Their Eyes Are Watching God. And these are the movies that black people are making. Or they're making films about subjects that, no one really cares about. But the black filmmaking has gotten into a real pigeonhole over the last 15 years thanks to people putting box office over creativity and also just being plain old lazy. I look at black film and it's in the worst state since the early 70s. I'd even dare to venture to say it's even in the worst state since the 40s when we had, Step and Fetch It out here cooning and buffooning and Hattie McDaniel playing maids, because these are the type of roles that we are seeing more often than not when it comes to products being made by Black Hollywood. The films are not creative, they're not original, they're very uninspired. The acting is not very good because many of the actors are very uninspired and they really don't bring much energy outside of maybe a handful of performers who seek to elevate themselves. And sadly, a lot of them only elevate themselves in minstrel roles. They cannot, really see a humanized range in other characters or see the humanity in other characters and convey the emotions of a human being outside of a slave, a butler, a maid, or some civil rights leader or other dead historical figure. And that's a really limited acting range. When you're acting, you really want to take things out of the box. You really want to do things different, and you really want to play characters that are, really different. You really want to put something fresh out there, and you really want to show the humanity of a character that is completely different from what people have ever seen before. That is what really makes a best actor, and that's what really surprises people. I remember when I was watching Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler. I mean, he put humanity on somebody you really wouldn't think of as a human being. When he played the Randy the Ram Robinson character, we really saw a multi-dimensional person, and we saw all the aspects of his life in and outside of the ring and all of his struggles, and it really put a humanity on him. I can't honestly say we're seeing that when it comes to black film. I mean, a lot of the roles I see, there's not really a lot of depth there, and there's not really a lot of humanity there, and that's why black film really has not been that good since the early '90s, with house parties and your Do the Right Things, your Malcolm X's, and all those great movies, because they put more depth into the story and into the characters and stuff. And instead of, because when that's the whole thing about, like when you Lee Daniels and his whole victimization story model, is that he's going for the cheap and easy when it comes to film. And, actors, really bad actors, try to find the humanity in these, dirty, degenerate characters, when that's pretty easy if you're an actor. If you're a really good actor, it's trying to find the humanity in somebody a little bit more complex. That's why there's a big difference between, your Quentin Tarantino, who does the same type of degenerate characters, but he shows us the humanity in a whole different way than, your Lee Daniels. I mean, it's a whole different perspective. I know I'm going into talking about film, but this is something I know. And you really don't see that with a lot of black films, and we're not really, exploring the richness of the black experience. This is another issue I have with black film, and this is another issue I have with this whole Selma Oscar snub. We really aren't exploring the richness of the black experience. Well, a lot of these films, they're just scratching the surface. I mean, there's a dozen stories that, black filmmakers could touch. I know there's financing issues, but if you write a really good screenplay, maybe people would get interested in investing in it. I mean, yeah, they made The Butler a couple of years ago. Again, another attempt to Lee Daniels and Oprah Winfrey, again, trying to grab for that Oscar, trying to bait for that Oscar. But that type of film really, we all saw it I saw it for what it was, an Oscar grab. And what it was I was saying to myself when I wrote a couple blogs about this, where's the film about Black Wall Street? Where's the film, about the black cowboys like Deadwood Dick, and The Real Lone Ranger? Where's the film, about, black sororities, like my book, The Thetas, showing it in a different perspective. Where's the film about, life in the '70s, black middle class family in the '70s? We had a lot of those, but we haven't told that story. And there's lots and lots of great stories to tell, but we're not telling those stories. Again, Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey and Lee Daniels, the trifecta of failure, as I like to call it, the trinity of failure, have pigeonholed black film into a non-stop minstrel show featuring, the same old victims. And after a while, it really gets tired of watching these people black actors go into victim mode and then fast track themselves to an Oscar and then wind up with a stalled career afterward. Because everybody who has played these minstrel roles over the last 15 years, with the exception of maybe Denzel Washington and Jamie Foxx, has not really gone anywhere career-wise, because they've played one role and they've played this victim role, and after that they got discarded. I look at black cinema, and I see a mess, and I see this whole Oscar snub as race hustlers getting ready to hustle the Hollywood studios at the expense of black people and black cinema. And what we're going to get, instead of more diverse films, we're going to get more of the same. And everybody's feeling sorry for themselves and still judging themselves by this white standard instead of trying to create a black standard for films. One of the things I try to do as a writer is I'm trying to create a black standard for literature, and with my positive stories about the African American experience, creating different stories within the African American experience, and exploring new genres in the African American experience. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create a new standard for black people, because we need to start taking a hard look at ourselves, and we need to start taking a hard look at the material we produce, the content we produce, and we need to start creating our own standard, because the people we have right now, they're creating things that fit a white liberal, white supremacist standard, and trying to get crumbs from the white liberals' table and the white supremacists' table at the expense of the black community. And all of them are extremely disingenuous, extremely dishonest, and they're trying to say that there is they're trying to get crumbs from the table by exploiting this so-called Selma Snub, so they can get jobs for themselves. They do not care about diversity in film. They do not care about true diversity in black entertainment. They do not care about presenting a diverse array of experiences on screen when it comes to black people, because if they were to present those diverse experiences, they could not play the victim card. They could not go into their codependent mode and play their usual race cards and get crumbs from the table. Because if we had, your black fantasy movies, your black sci-fi movies, truly great black comedy and black drama on screen, they could not go on and go into full victim mode, talking about getting snubbed in the acting categories. They would be forced to produce films to a black standard, because the black standard would be completely different from what they have right now. Because the films they're making now, again, they fit within a white supremacist standard, a white liberal standard. This is what the white liberal wants to see from black people playing the victim role, and their codependent need to be this great white savior of this dysfunctional Negro, pick him up, dust him off, and make him the semblance of human, but not human. This is something that they want to do. This is something they need to do, and as black people, we really have to look at this standard, look at ourselves through a different lens, and that's not going to be done by people marching and protesting. Again, this is another example of your selective outrage. Symbolically, yes, they symbolically made a statement. The liberal made a statement about racism by announcing these all-white Academy Award nominations, having their black president announce these all-white Academy Award nominations on Dr. King's birthday. But the big problem was the response of black people to those nominations. What we needed to do is say, I'm not judging myself by your standard. I am going to judge myself by my own standard. This is something I have done for the last 25 years as a consumer of black entertainment, and it's something I urge other black people to do when they watch black entertainment or entertainment featuring black performers, is to judge it by a black standard and to establish it by a black standard, because our standard needs to be completely different from that of the white liberal and white supremacy. Because if we don't make ourselves matter, no one else will. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.